Welcome to the second in a three-part series in a new virtual conference for the 2020 Deer Industry Conference. This is held across the web right now for the next hour on Deer Industry's YouTube and Facebook pages, as well as, of course, deernz.org, the Deer Industry New Zealand website. I'm Sarah Perriam, and I'm delighted to be your MC for these interactive live-streamed sessions, as well as our production team here at Perriam Media, contracted to broadcast this from on the Lincoln University campus here, handling the broadcast across these 3 Tuesdays from 1 o'clock. Now, each session will run between an hour to 90 minutes, and they are being recorded. So if you do miss any presentations from last week, or of course this one, or of course next week is the last, they will be made available a few days after on demand on the Deer Industry New Zealand YouTube channel. And of course, did you know Deer Industry New Zealand have a podcast? So wherever you love to listen to your podcasts, simply search Deer Industry New Zealand. And actually, last year's conference presentations are up there as well. And it's a great way to be able to share with your teams who either miss this webinar and further spread that extension of great knowledge that comes out of the organisation every year. This is, as I said, an interactive conference, so I want to test out the chat functionality, and I have it here on my laptop. I can see the comment section across YouTube and Facebook. For those of you who were watching last week, we did have some complications with the Q&A system on the Deer Industry website, so we've ditched that. So if you're watching there on the Deer New Zealand website right now, if you want to participate in the YouTube chat, where everyone seemed to be going quite confidently last week, simply click on the left-hand corner on the YouTube video player, and it should take you straight through to YouTube. You'll find the chat in just underneath the player there on YouTube. So I want to test out to see if there's anyone watching. I can see 30 people straight away off the bat. Good on you. So just to make sure that you're not robots, write your name and where you are watching from. It's always quite nice to know who is, especially some pretty familiar names that pop up since I've been involved with the deer industry for quite some time now. So all you got to do, I just want to see that this chat is working. That's on YouTube. If you're watching on Facebook, of course, just write it in the comments below. It is important that you make the most of the fact that it is interactive. And of course, we've only got short 10-minute presentations from our presenters tonight. Today. It's not tonight. Do too many nighttime gigs. So please don't feel afraid to ask any questions. This is a very safe environment to be able to, and it's your chance to be able to communicate direct with your industry representatives. As I found last week, all of a sudden they came rushing right at the end, but that's probably because you had such genuine interest in the Kala Science Project. So get your questions in early for our guests coming up in the second session in this 3-part series over the next hour and a half. Now, who is on this? If you're not looking at the schedule, Velvet marketing guru Rhys Griffiths is going to be giving a 10-minute brief market update after 1:20, followed by a live Q&A with not only himself but Ross Chambers from Provico, Colin Stevenson and Hugh Single from Alpine Deer, with apologies from Mr. Tony Cochran from PGG Wrightson, who can't be with us today. So get those questions in early, however, of course, whilst you're watching the presentation. Now, after 1:40, Phil McKenzie, the Farm Performance Manager for Deer Industry New Zealand, will be giving a presentation on some of the market-led projects through the Passion to Profit that's helping transform the New Zealand venison industry. P2P is a jointly funded collaboration by venison marketing companies, Deer Industry New Zealand, the DFA, and government funding from MPI. We're going to ask Phil some questions and closer to 2 o'clock, not directly after his presentation. So get those questions in around P2P and where it's at. Following Phil, we're going to head straight into the wonderful Sarah Howe and Millie Howe. They've both been involved in the Story, Perception and Value project, part of a Passion to Profit workshops that were held last year. After 1:40, I'm going to ask them about the project to create an industry-led communication strategy and how they're involving millennial consumers. Then we get an update from Nicola McGrother from Creekside Consulting and Hugh Jackson, who is a training officer from Dairy New Zealand, on the Rural Professionals workshop that took place, and of course that wonderful concept of the Big Deer Tour. But to kick things off, we have the first pre-recorded presentation today from Catherine Sayer, Science and Policy Manager for Deer Industry New Zealand, where we will learn about the change in composition of New Zealand deer velvet over the last 30 years and whether there's been significant differences between sticks from the different farming systems. And after her presentation, we will take your questions live. Unfortunately, not for Catherine, as she was unable to be with us today, but we have the legend, leading New Zealand velvet researcher, Dr. Stephen Haynes, on the line to take your live questions. And of course, as I said, velvet marketing guru Reese Griffiths. He can see me, I can see him laughing there. And of course, TP, Tony Pearce, producer manager for Deer Industry New Zealand. Remember, of course, those places, YouTube chat and Facebook, to see, to put those questions and general chat. Having a look down, good on you. We are well underway as opposed to last week, so you've worked it out. Grant Dixon is here from Waikato, Hilary Nicholson from Fairlie in South Canterbury, Chris Gibbs from Methven, Richard Shaw is watching from the Hopkirk Research Centre in Palmerston North, Ali Spencer and from Wellington, Hayden is here from Greymouth, and James Pearce from Pleasant Point. Good to see that you have got the YouTube chat functionality working. Now, if you are struggling at any time, please just send me an email with questions as well for our guest, sarah@periummedia.com. We're going to kick off with Catherine's presentation in the online 3-part live Deer Industry Conference for 2020. Up next, after this short break, from a word from one of our sponsors.
Dinner doesn't start with the twist of a knob that releases the gas that ignites the hob, nor does it start in the depths of a book from the depths of a mind of a passionate cook. It starts way back in the soil and land at the mercy of the elements in a farmer's hand. And there lies the question that needs to be raised. This dinner of yours, was it loved? Was it praised? If the answer is yes, then you'll probably see it started right here, and oh, what a meal it will be.
Hello, my name's Catherine Sayer and I'm the Science and Policy Manager at Deer Industry New Zealand. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to report back to you today on a major piece of levy-funded research you've been eagerly anticipating relating to the quality of premium New Zealand velvet. We know that you velvet producers are actively pursuing ways to improve how you farm your stags for health, welfare and productivity reasons. VANZ, which stands for Velvet Antler Research New Zealand, wanted to find out whether your farm system improvements could change the quality and composition of New Zealand velvet since the last composition survey in 1991. In this study, VANZ randomly took antlers from 6 farms across both islands, took notes on the farming systems, the parentage of the herd, the time of cutting since button drop. But I'm pleased to reveal that the results are strikingly positive. Let's have a look. VANZ recorded a massive improvement in the quality of your antlers, with blue being values from 1991 and orange being today's velvet. We can see that the bioactive organic fraction of the components, that's lipid and protein, is significantly greater now than in 1991. Protein's gone up by 25% and lipid by 4%. The inactive ash portion, that's the portion we don't want, is decreased by 10%, step in the right direction. On average, the upper portion of our current antlers now contains more bioactive substances than were found in the whole antler in 1991. Let's look at some of the findings in more detail. Let's look at size. If you were velveting back in 1991, your main crop would have looked a lot like the stick on the left. You're now likely to be producing sticks like that on the right, which is a modern Super A grade specimen. Thinking only about the upper portion of the bean, that's the part indicated with a green bracket, we found that that proportion made up 38% of the whole stick weight in 1991 but that same portion now makes up almost 48% of the stick's mass. Turning now to quality rather than weight, we found that the bioactive components we mentioned before, lipids and protein, are increasing their distribution towards that upper part of the antler. Protein especially has increased massively in that upper part, up from 58.1% in 1991 to 71.2% of the upper portion today. All right, now some of you may be wondering how consistent production is between different operations. So, Barnes investigated composition across different deer, different farms, and different farming systems. Broadly speaking, across the whole stick, the composition of red deer antlers from the 6 farms was similar. Although if we broke the sticks down into different sections, which we did do, there were significant differences between farms in the levels of some components in those sections. Consistency of production is a good thing for our customers in terms of reproducibility between batches when making extracts from whole sticks. Nevertheless, there is potential for a manufacturer to be more sophisticated in terms of matching individual farms to particular products if it really wanted to make a particular product from a particular section. Genetics and breed didn't have much influence on quality, and in the one farm we studied that had used PKE in the diet, it didn't have an effect. We wouldn't recommend using PKE as a standard production input, but this very preliminary investigation nevertheless gives comfort to our producers under severe feed pressure from the effects of drought this year. Now let's look at whether you've nailed the cutting date. Yes, you have. Our velvet producer's intuition about the right time to cut velvet perfectly matches the optimum cutting time in terms of the highest composition of bioactives. So this slide shows the Velvet Activity Index, VAI, of different portions of the antler, which is assessed by the amount of lipid and low molecular weight protein measured over time, taken from sticks harvested at the days from button drop matching super A grade, which are the blue values, 7 days later, the red values, and sticks harvested a fortnight later, the green values. Velvet Activity Index score is highest in the tip, followed by the upper portion and tray tines, as you may expect. But looking at the downward shift in scores from blue through red, then green, the Velvet Activity Index decreases with cutting, delayed by a week and then another week, except in the tip, which is always good, even if overgrown. So let's recap on the learnings from this study. First, the work our velvet producers have put into their farming systems is continually improving velvet quality. Second, there's high consistency in velvet quality between deer and velvet farms. So even in mixed consignments, our velvet exporters can be confident in providing a high degree of consistency in quality to their customers. Third, our industry knows the composition of what it's producing, and that is a premium quality product with significant proportions of bioactive components. So I'll now hand over to AgResearch's Chief Velvet Scientist who conducted this study, Dr. Stephen Haynes, who can give insights into more of the detail, such as amino acid composition, and my DINS colleagues, Reese Griffiths, our Marketing Manager, and Dr. Tony Pierce, our Producer Manager. Feel free to raise your questions by pressing the Ask button. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Manager for Deer Industry New Zealand with her pre-recorded presentation. And joining us now on the line is Dr. Stephen Haynes, leading New Zealand expert in velvet research, as well as known to many of you, velvet marketing manager for Deer Industry New Zealand, Rhys Griffiths, and producer manager, Tony Pearce. Welcome, gentlemen, to this innovative Deer Industry New Zealand conference following Catherine Sayer's presentation there. Now, I'm just going to kick it off with 3 questions, one to each of you, whilst our audience gets some of the questions from Catherine's presentation written in the YouTube chats or, of course, the Facebook underneath to you specifically. If you are asking a question, if you would like to just please put who you would like me to ask the question to, it makes it a bit more clean and tidy. Now, Stephen, firstly, I was just wanting to know, back in 1991 was the last composition and analysis was done, and there was a comparison done with Chinese and Russian velvet. Was it done this time?
Unfortunately, this time we haven't been able to do it so far. The costs have gone up a lot in the last 20 odd years. So when we budgeted for this experiment, we could only look at New Zealand antlers in the first pass. We have plans to look at Chinese antlers. Getting those antlers out of China and into New Zealand is actually proving a wee bit of a mission, so we're a bit delayed on that project, unfortunately. And the Russian antlers really would be a very difficult proposition at the moment, so we don't have any immediate plans to look at those, but the comparison would be very interesting again. And as I say, we hope to look at Chinese antlers very soon.
Rhys, this information is great, but how is it used in the marketplace?
Thanks for that. And actually, if I could just add to what Dr. Haynes was saying, I mean, it's great to have that compositional or comparative compositional analysis, but really it's an awesome thing for us to be able to go to the companies, particularly those in South Korea that we partner closely with, and say, hey, you know what, our composition, our own New Zealand velvet has increased in its quality significantly over the last 40 years. What farmers are doing really matters. We've seen amino acids, for example, increase significantly, 25% and what have you. So it's a great way for us to shape our velvet, New Zealand velvet brand, and say, and really demonstrate that we're continuing to improve our quality. Actually, with the last lot of research we did, which was on some healthy brain function work, we did up a little flyer to give out to the respective big food companies, and it gives them confidence about the New Zealand velvet that they're using. So it's our intention to do the same with this compositional work as well. So we'll be certainly using it from a marketing perspective.
Tony, listening there to Catherine Sayer's presentation, what are some of those take-home messages that deer farmers watching and listening on demand should be taking away?
I think there's two really, and that's the amazing power of selection on good style and conformation and genetics that has underpinned that improvement. And we've seen that in the national competition, how the weights have all just shot up, but the quality and that vindication of that, the grading chart, that's the second point, the grading chart that's been developed, is a very good chart, and that composition analysis would show that the genetic gain's been captured and the quality of the velvet has been maintained throughout.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now, of course, as we said, this is an interactive session as well. And sorry, Tony, to cut you off there. Did you say that you were finished?
That's all right.
My apologies. This is an interactive conference as well, so make sure that you've got any questions for these 3 gentlemen and make sure you get them in across, of course, YouTube and Facebook. So, Stephen, where to from here?
The next thing, as I said earlier, really is to try and complete the comparison with Chinese velvet. I'd be really interested to see whether they've made similar gains. I have an opinion on that, which I won't voice, but I really want to see how their antler in our current year compare. When we looked at them in 1991, the New Zealand antlers at that time compared very favourably, and I have seen some papers where comparisons have been made over the past 15 or so years, and again, New Zealand antlers have consistently come out looking very good against the Chinese antlers. I would like to see how good that comparison is today.
And I think this is directed at you as well, Stephen, is from your chair of the Dinsmore and Walker. Can the diet of the stags influence the quality of the velvet? Thinking about brassicas, crops, grains, maize, silage, as well as PKE.
There certainly would be indications in the literature that nutrition of the stags can have an influence, and we would suspect that some more extreme diets would certainly do so. To really investigate that, we would need to do a proper controlled nutrition study. We attempted to have a wee look at the use of PKE as a primary feed input in this study, but we recognise that since we're only doing that on one single farm and didn't control the nutrition, it really wasn't a true comparison of the effects of nutrition. So we would really need to look at the diet in a lot more detail. I wouldn't expect, to be honest, huge differences apart from perhaps more extreme sort of diets, but what we've seen so far doesn't say that we should see massive changes.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us off the back of Catherine Sayers' presentation there. Now, up next on the Deer Industry New Zealand Conference, where the focus is on you in this 3-part series over 3 Tuesdays from 1 p.m. We will welcome to the live stream to stay on the line with us, Reith Griffiths, for a velvet market update after this short message from our sponsors.
A couple of years ago, we purchased a tough 3,000-acre hill block adjacent to our 4,000 acres of flats. This block has added the perfect balance to our venison program and Peel Forest Estate. At Peel Forest Estate, all our deer have electronic ear tags. We use Gallagher equipment to record every facet of the work that happens here, whether it's animal health, weights, grouping, pedigree analysis, comments and drafting. We have a very accurate data collection system which we then analyse on either the Gallagher APS software or CervidIQ. You know, back in the day when we didn't have the access to Gallagher software and hardware, it was all manual data entry and yelling tag numbers out in the deer shed with dirty ear tags, everything. It was a nightmare and took forever. We've got 8,000 deer here. They're all EID'd now. They're all DNA'd, so we have full pedigrees on every animal here on the farm. And we do a lot of recording of certain traits and weights, and so you know the amount of data that we're gathering here is huge. And without Gallagher, it would just it used to be a huge job. Now it's made it very easy. You know, I make draft lists on the HR5, and I can now process 600 hinds an hour through the Octagon, drafting 8 different ways, which is invaluable at mating time. I'm sending the hinds out the door as fast as the boys can keep them up to me. In the past, it was a massive job. We continue to grow with the software. We're using it more and more and creating more traits and more life data fields, and just the level of information that we have on our animals now is massive. You know, we're running 4 deer sheds. We've got 2 TSIs, 2 HR5s, so we can be gathering data all over the show here now. You know, the other thing I really like about Gallagher is their backup support. We've always there might be some teething problems, or I don't know how to do something, so they're just a phone call away. They jump on TeamViewer, and so they're on my computer basically showing me how to do it, and they always have a solution to my problems. It's very simple to load from APS Office. All the analysing we do there is we do a lot of analysing within APS, but we also download sessions and analyse further on Excel and our stud program too, and that's all very seamless and easy. So all in all, we couldn't live without it now.
Hey, well, hi folks. Thanks for tuning in to the brief session on Velvet Markets. We've had to come up to speed pretty quickly with all this video conferencing and webinars and what have you, and I must admit it's not as much fun as the physical meetings. However, one benefit for you guys, that's the audience out there watching this spiel, is that I'm going to keep this talk pretty brief. The key part for this segment will be the panelists that I've invited to interact with you at the end of this presentation. So I urge you to please send in your questions to Sarah via the chat boxes. On the panel today, we're really lucky to have Tony Cochrane, PGG Wrightson and current DINS board director, Colin Stevenson, CK Import Export and previous board director. We've also got Ross Chambers, General Manager for Provalco Cooperative Limited, and Hugh Signal, Managing Director of Alpine Deer Products. So we're living in pretty unprecedented times, and we can be proud of that New Zealand has shown its strength again as a very small nation that can work well together. We've gained some real kudos on the world stage, and don't underestimate how our markets will perceive us and what impacts that this might have on our products. Our message was simple: be kind, stay home, save lives. But as you guys know, the global impacts have been significant. Here's a photo of an empty square in Rome, and it not only shows the absence of our consumers that might otherwise be dining out on premium New Zealand venison, but it also demonstrates a lack of foot traffic that has impacted a lot of retail across the globe, and it affects a wide range of products, including velvet. Last week, during the CEO's presentation, Innes talked about Deer Industry New Zealand's approach to the market in the wake of dealing with COVID-19. At DINS, we affectionately call it the 3 C's approach. First C being China, so clarifying a pathway for deer, and I'm going to cover that in a bit more detail shortly. And the other 2 are channels, so increasing new channel development, particularly along venison side, and customers, so food service, getting ready for return to normal by increasing our support of activity undertaken by our venison marketing companies. So Nick will cover channels and customer activity for his venison segment during next week. Clarifying the position for New Zealand deer in China became a potentially very serious and urgent issue for Deer Industry New Zealand to address, due to an unintended effect following proposed measures in the wake of COVID-19. To put it in perspective, China is the New Zealand deer industry's single biggest market, accounting for around 1/3 of all of our deer products by the time you take into consideration velvet, co-products, and now venison. In the future, opportunities in this market are significant, and suddenly there was a possibility that access might get disrupted. China's rapid attention to outlaw bush meats as a way of addressing reports that COVID-19 might have originated from a bat is absolutely commendable. However, there was initially some confusion as to where deer sat in this mix. Of course, we know that our deer are farmed and we treat them like other acceptable livestock, including sheep and cattle. But as a relatively young industry, some perceive that deer are wild or game type animal. This position wasn't actually helped when a large city published a list of 9 permissible meats that didn't include deer. So, working with MPI, Ministry for Primary Industries, and respected government agencies in China, we were pleased when our final list was published by the central government that included deer. In fact, the journal used as a reference it didn't just mention deer, but it also had a whole page dedicated to New Zealand deer. And we understand that New Zealand is the only country referenced in the journal for deer in China. So that's great news. So on to velvet. While velvet was less impacted by COVID-19 than other product groups, it wasn't immune. And there are a number of concerns that we're watching, and they include the economic impact onto our consumers. So as we all know, velvet consumption has grown in part due to the increasing individual wealth profile of our consumers in Asia. However, early indications are that our core markets in China, Taiwan, and South Korea might come out of this a little bit better than their Western counterparts from an economic standpoint. The second issue that we're watching is supply chain disruptions. Now, we would estimate that about a third of New Zealand's velvet is processed in China and re-exported to South Korea, and this supply chain was affected. There is also significant disruptions due to air freight. So passenger aircraft account for a lot of air freight as well. And with a decimation of this service, the cost of air freight went up significantly. The New Zealand government is looking at ways to work with industry and exporters to address this issue, which we're pleased to see. And finally, customer engagement. So how do we meet with our partners in the markets and develop plans to promote New Zealand velvet up there? So what do we do? What do we do with customer engagement? Well, it's a bit like this conference, really. In May, during level 4 lockdown, we hosted a virtual Korean market visit. We ran it over 3 consecutive afternoons and evenings and met with our 12 key partners in both the food and oriental medicine doctor sectors, as well as some key importers as well. We used our Korean-based contractors to organise the meetings and also carry out all the technical components. And what was really great is that the meetings could involve more DINS staff, more of my colleagues here at Dairy Industry New Zealand. We were really lucky to have Dairy Industry New Zealand Science and Policy Manager, Catherine, as well as our Environmental Stewardship Manager, Lindsay. Catherine was able to describe firsthand the latest research on velvet composition that you've just heard in the previous webinar and how much New Zealand velvet has improved over the years. Including Lindsay was also a real bonus. So in Asia, many people perceive New Zealand as a clean, green country, and we're really heartened to see the industry investing and ensuring that this continues for generations to come. This really helps the overall position of the New Zealand velvet brand. The virtual market visit to Korea was a great chance to manage our customer relationships and provide a bit of a novelty factor, it must be said. You can see from the central picture on this particular slide that the typical photo opportunity still exists. And what do we find when we're talking to our customers? Well, firstly, the negative. Bricks and mortar, the physical stores, were impacted, as you'd imagine, with no foot traffic happening. Oriental medicine doctor clinics also suffered as elderly patients stayed away from clinics for fear of coming into contact with actual COVID-19, similar to probably what happened over here with doctors. But we actually had reports that both of these areas have rebounded somewhat now. Next, on to the positive. And there are 3 key elements here. So companies reported that their online and home shopping channels increased in sales, in some areas, quite a bit. Secondly, products with perceived immune function benefits were higher in demand. And thirdly, reports from other places like our embassy in South Korea were that New Zealand health products, and particularly food, were in strong demand as well. So how has our velvet season gone? Final figures, it's too early to have final figures available yet, but our latest estimates are that production will be slightly up on last year. We've budgeted for about 850 tonnes, and we should be reasonably close to that figure. Large exporters report that they've pretty much sold all of their product. Actually, that was the case about 2 or 3 months ago. So things were a bit slower to move this year, though. With the increasing production figures, exporters need to work harder every year to sell the increasing volumes. And of course, prices were back a bit on last year, but I do really want to emphasise that this is due to supply chain disruptions rather than any potential downsides on the consumption. In fact, there have been even more products launched over the course of this year, even during the COVID outbreak, that contains and promotes New Zealand velvet. This slide alone shows 7 new products that were launched over the last few months. So the picture of our velvet industry is pretty positive. We've got a healthy and growing industry. And over the last 8 years, it has nearly doubled in its volume and more than trebled in its value. It's good to have a growing and confident industry, but we do need to be mindful of growing too fast. What will next year bring? Well, it's still too early to predict, but there are some known facts. Number one, many consumers in Asia use New Zealand velvet for perceived immune function properties. That's a great space to be in right now. Number two, underlying demand for New Zealand velvet in both South Korea, and in China is strong. And there is increasing interest now from other parts of Asia as well that we are currently investigating. And finally, the farm gate value for velvet is also really strong at over $100 million. We've come a long way from only a few years ago when the industry was around that $30 million mark and decreasing. So things are looking pretty good out there, but we just need to be mindful on a few of those factors. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I look forward to engaging with you shortly on the panel. Thank you.
Really pleased we got into this. Thanks for your help, Dave.
It's a good idea, honey. You reckon it'll come out? Cover it and tell Compal to leave it 10 minutes, and you'll be fine. Good call, Dave.
Good call on getting those security cameras, Dave.
You caught a new one yet?
Yeah, kind of.
When you've got decisions to make, we'll be there to help you make the right call.
I'd go for those ones, Bob. Yeah, good call.
Did you choose these?
Oh, you know.
For great advice and insurance, talk to FMG.
Thank you to all of you who may have just joined us in the 2020 Deer Industry Conference interactive 3-part series across 3 Tuesdays. Now we have a full packed schedule, and over the next half an hour that we have left, and this of course is interactive. It's all about your questions. You've been straight off the mark to start with, which has been absolutely fantastic. And we have a panel to take your live Q&A around Rhys Griffiths' Velvet Market Update. There, we're just finalising the last one on the call, so of course it's great to look down and see where you're all watching. Rachel Halden and Kurt are here in Christchurch. Watching is Ian Walker, of course, Waipokora, and heading over to Facebook. There we have a few familiar faces. It's good to see Millie Howard's watching. She is coming up shortly. Lisa Roberts from Goa, Sophie Mulder from Murchison, Judith and Kim are watching, and of course Bill Robinson from Cambridge is back watching again. We also have been joined by a gentleman from Vietnam. We want to import velvet and other deer products. We might have to get Rhys onto him. And as we go now, we are joined by Rhys Griffiths, Velvet Marketing Manager for Deer Industry New Zealand. On the line. Just while we get the other gentleman up, Joel, I might just ask Rhys a question. Wonderful. So Rhys, why does DINS disclose, I will just get you just to pause your thing there. I can hear myself back there, Rhys. No, that's all good. Now, why does DINS disclose New Zealand's production figures when overseas importers might use them to drive down prices, especially with global broadcasts like this?
I'm actually...
That might be coming from our end, Rhys.
Sorry, I'm unable to hear you directly through the platform there, but I think you've just asked me about disclosing prices.
Yeah, so why does DINS disclose New Zealand's production figures when overseas importers might use them against us to drive prices down?
Yeah, great question, Sarah. Hey, sorry, I just had a couple of technical issues there, but I heard that loud and clear. It's one of those really tricky situations that we're posed with. It's there are commodity traders up in the markets that will use anything they can do to try and drive down prices or try and manipulate prices in some way. I'm not saying there's everyone out there, but there are one or two. Our production has been increasing here in New Zealand. But it's been increasing to meet an increasing demand for velvet, so increasing consumption. From our point of view, we need to budget, provide a budget, and we need to go out and consult to people on that budget. So we need to consult to our farmers and our exporters and say, hey, look, guys, this year we're looking at producing around about 850 tonnes or whatever it is. So when we go out and we consult to people, sometimes that message can get out to the markets as well. And about 2 or 3 years ago, we certainly had the message. We were clocking at around about 600, 650 tonnes. And there was a message out there from a couple of people, hey, don't talk about the tonnage in the marketplace. But in the absence of us not referring to it in our normal kind of absolutely transparent kind of way of operating, I can tell you right now that most of the people out there, we're kind of estimating that our tonnage that season would be about 1,000 tonnes or something that was absolutely ridiculous. So in the absence of our communication, the actual tonnage became much worse. So we need to consult with people. We need to budget on how we on how much we think we're going to get, and we need to be transparent with our partners in the market.
Now, we are running a bit short on time today, so I will just ask you to hold some of these questions for the gentlemen that we have. We have Ross Chambers from Provilco, Colin Stevenson from CK, and Hugh Single from Alpine Deer, with the apologies to Tony Cochrane from PGG Wrightson not joining us. As I was joking with Reese, if it was a live conference with a bar, he probably would have not missed it. Oh, we love Tony. So just welcoming to the program there, Hugh, Colin and Ross. Now, we were talking about velvet composition earlier, Reese, with Dr. Stephen Haynes and, of course, Catherine Sayer's presentation. Colin, question to you. What do you think about the velvet composition research presented earlier? Do you think it's going to help us sell more products?
I think in the long term it could be very beneficial to us, especially as companies move further toward polypeptides, amino acids. Long term, it must give us some grunt in the market. There's quite a push that I've seen in some of these huge factories overseas, trying to look at different kinds of products that have potential health benefits in it.
Now you're all, Ross, Colin and Hugh, you're all velvet buyers. Ross, what are your views on the style of velvet? Are we getting too big and too ugly?
Look, it's a tricky question to answer quickly, but what we've got in the market are two sectors. We've got traditional and we've got the evolving modern sector. Non-traditional styles aren't really popular with the traditional sector, but of course that message can be obscured by competition and people, entrepreneurs, doing their thing. But as a pretty sound rule of thumb, traditional sticks are more versatile, more sought after. But of course, the growth in our overall volume has been mainly from increase in weights per stag. That certainly helped increase the total kilos that's produced. So some buyers are more adaptable than others, but if we want to maximise the opportunity for velvet, style is important. But with the benefit of things like research, there is a place for non-traditional grades too. It's just that they're less flexible in terms of the final use, and that's a little less attractive to some buyers.
And Hugh, what about the prospects of these co-products? I know that Alpine Deer do so well.
The prospects for co-products remain particularly strong despite COVID. I suppose the challenge we have in front of us now is rebuilding channels that have been disrupted and in some cases isolated by COVID. So fundamentally, Deer co-product is an immune boosting product, and as we move through the Northern Hemisphere summer and into the autumn, we expect the consumption and the will to consume to be as great as ever, if not greater. But obviously some challenges to continue to connect the product with that consumption.
Now, we do have one question here, which I'm going to put to Reese to answer briefly, which I failed to get to Dr. Stephen Haynes, but it is a good question that James Pearce has asked. Was composition across grades looked at A versus SA versus SANT? It has been indicated that SANT isn't favoured going forward, or is this driven by processability, not quality?
Yeah, hey, look, that's a great question, James. And it is a pity that we weren't able to get that across to Dr. Haynes. We didn't actually look at SANT versus Super A traditional and what have you. We did have a look at trophy genetics versus velvet genetics, but we didn't record button drop. And so we weren't able to go out and say, look, button dropping on this day, so therefore we're going to remove it 55 days and compare them both. So we didn't get a really good, accurate read of that. We know that once it starts to blow out into an SANT, we start losing that really nice jelly tip at the top. And that's worth a lot of money, particularly in China, in that Chinese market. So that starts to dissipate pretty quick. That's one of both a market and a processing issue. So great question.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, all for taking the time to join us on this brief Q&A here as part of the Deer Industry New Zealand Conference 2020, where the focus is on you. Of course, 3-part series over 3 Tuesdays, and this, of course, being the second one. After this, shortly, we're going to welcome to the live stream Phil McKenzie, Farm Performance Manager for Deer Industry New Zealand. Now, he's going to be talking about the Passion to Profit, a jointly funded collaboration, as we said, between venison marketing companies, Deer Industry New Zealand, the New Zealand DFA, and of course government through MPI. It's coming into its 5th year, involving a range of projects spanning marketing premium venison and improving market-led productivity on farm. We are going to find out in Phil's presentation about these market-led projects that will help transform the New Zealand venison industry. And of course, we will take questions to Phil towards the end, which will be probably around 2:20 at my guess. So all that coming up in the Deer Industry New Zealand Conference.
Passion to Profit started an amazing 5 years ago. Known to us as P2P, it has 2 core components. One, the marketing of our venison, and there's a collaborative initiative, 5 of the companies marketing venison, and my colleague Nick Taylor looks after that part of the program, and he'll talk more to you next week when he talks about the marketing venison. My part is the market-led part of the P2P, the other half of the program, which is all the farmer-facing projects. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Before I start onto that, I do want to acknowledge, as others have, the stress that the drought has caused this year. It's epicenter in Hawke's Bay, but it's pinched us hard through over 2/3 of the country. And I really feel for you guys. And I'm hoping that the networks of mates that we've been able to create through P2P has helped some of you with that, and will help you as you get through the winter as well. So don't be afraid to call out for any help. P2P is a joint investment with the Deer Industry, Deer Farmers Association, and the government through the Ministry of Primary Industries. And we've developed a great collaborative relationship, and we've been able to build some great programs together. COVID-19 was the disruption we didn't need on top of everything else. But it's also enabled us to pivot into a new way of interacting. We went suddenly from being outstanding in our field to being outstanding on the small screen. And we're able to pursue quite a few initiatives as a part of that. I'm hoping as we move back into face-to-face interactions that we continue some of that online interaction. Really, there's nothing other than time zones that stop us from beaming in anyone from anywhere in the world. During the COVID-19 period, we've been having an ongoing dialogue with MPI. They've been very supportive through the program, and particularly in the COVID-19 period. And after discussions, we've got approval to extend the P2P program for a further 12 months so that we can finish the program in style. So that will take us through to 30 June 2023. And between Nick and I and all of you involved in the programs, we'll be working out how we phase those so that we complete the program as we promised. P2P, perhaps the most famous flagship product we have is our advanced parties, and they've been a fantastic initiative. During COVID-19, or during this period that COVID forced us into some form of lockdown, we would normally have had some advanced party chair forums where the chairs would gather regionally. And Pānia pivoted this year to a series of 5 online development forums, AP development forums. And we opened it up to facilitators and anyone in the advanced parties. And everyone was able to participate. And lots of people did join in. It seemed a bit awkward at first, but once we got rolling, there was some great conversations happening. And one of the participants commented, because we were able to make them nationwide, that it seems like we've got one nationwide team of advanced parties. It isn't just our little AP. So I thought that was great, and another one of those things that I'd like to see us continue with. As important as advanced parties are, they're not the only initiative that P2P has going. And today I want to talk about some of the other initiatives that we have going as well. In fact, I'm going to go one better, much better in fact, and get the participants themselves to talk about some of the groups they're in. And we'll hear from them in a moment, this week and next week, when we talk about environment groups as well, which is another P2P program. And I'm going to be around for the Q&A session at the end of those presentations as well. But in case I don't get a chance, I did just want to encourage you to make use of the P2P program, whether it's developing a network of other like-minded farmers, tapping into their expertise, find out what worked, maybe more importantly, find out what didn't work, so you don't repeat it. Use the opportunities to get support to help you really grow your business even further. And now let's hear from some of those participants in the other groups and see what they're up to. Thank you for your time.
How do I get rid of these lightweight fawns? They're a blasted nuisance. Late-born fawns will always be among the lightest in the mob, meaning they'll miss target kill dates or be underweight for yearling mating. Birth date is determined by conception date, and early conception is heritable, so consistent selection for early conception will bring forward your mob's average fawning date. Fetal aging is a useful herd management tool. If you want to condense and bring forward your average fawning date, ask your scanner to fetal age and then cull late conceiving hinds. Fetal aging is a reliable way of assessing conception date and likely fawning date. Your scanner will be able to estimate the conception date of every hind based on the size and physical features of the fetus. This can be done between 30 and 80 days of pregnancy, so between mid-May and mid-June is a target time. Moving average birth date forward by 10 days might mean average weights could be 3 to 4 kgs heavier at weaning. That's money in your pocket, saving time and making management easier because you reduce the number of late fawns to deal with. Knowing the expected fawning date also allows separate management of fawning mobs. You could separate hinds into early and late fawning mobs, with grazing management to suit. The separation of early and late fawning mobs also improves fawn survival. To recap, late-born fawns never catch up. Remove late conceiving hinds to bring forward average fawning date. Bringing forward average fawning date by 10 days might increase average weaning weight by 3 to 4 kgs.
As Phil mentioned, we are now going to hear from some people involved in 2 or 3 of the Passion to Profit projects. One of these was the P2P Innovation Workshop. This was started in 2019 to bring together a group of 40 future industry leaders, both deer farmers and other rural professionals. The aim was to enhance their skills, including networking and personal development, to help them better manage their own businesses. Now, following on from those 2 workshops, in smaller groups, they went on to choose to work together on 4 mini projects. They were focused on community, industry change, consumer, and stories, perceptions, and values. Today, we're going to hear a little about the Stories, Perceptions, and Values project, and I'm joined now by 2 members of that group, Sarah Howe and Millie Howe. Now, Millie Howe grew up on a deer farm in South Canterbury and now lives on Peel Forest Estate, which is a venison, velvet and trophy stud. Millie works with Balance Agri-Nutrients as a nutrient specialist. The Innovation Group has allowed for her to connect with other like-minded individuals that are passionate about promoting the deer industry. And Sarah Howe is from a mixed farming background in mid-Canterbury and has experience working as an agronomist and now in people management and strategy for Dairy NZ. She was drawn into the Innovation Group because of the aim to build capability in young people in the agri sector. Now, we're going to kick off by asking Millie. Millie, you've been part of this P2P Innovation Group from the outset. How is it going and what have you got out of it so far?
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I've really enjoyed being part of this group. It's been an awesome opportunity for like-minded people to come together and really chew the fat on things we can do to promote the venison industry and how we can give back to the deer industry. And because the deer industry is a smaller group, it has a real community feel for it. So everyone's really open to sharing ideas. And we've also been very spoiled with presenters that we've had speak to us, like Kira Evans, who was amazing.
Oh, wow. That's a very high-level speaker. Fantastic. And so, as I've mentioned, both Millie and Sarah are part of the Story, Perception and Values project group. Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about this topic and why you felt it needed addressing?
Yeah, sure, Sarah. So we came together on one of the first innovation groups, and we soon found ourselves splintered off into other groups where we thought work needed to be done in the deer industry. And we realised in the group that I became a part of that many New Zealanders probably don't know a lot about the deer or the venison industry. And so with that, we risk being victim to some of the misconceptions about farming that are out there. And these could be to do with environmental footprint, animal welfare, or just why we do what we do. So our mini group realised that our industry didn't appear to have a unified or proactive communication strategy to promote our story and our values to the general New Zealand public. So we thought that this was something that we could put energy into and kickstart.
And Millie, so how does this group plan on kickstarting, as Sarah just said, this communication strategy?
Well, initially, we really needed to identify what is our industry's story and values. And we did agree that the New Zealand deer industry really prides itself on being a family farming community that wants to create a sustainable, high-quality protein that has a low environmental footprint, and we really do enjoy what we do. And so we then needed to go ahead and identify a target audience to direct our messaging to. And so we thought uni students would be a good start and they'd be a good pilot, as we see them as quite an influential group. And we believe that so 18 to 35-year-old age range have become more conscious of what they're consuming and where it's from. And so now our group is involved with 2 Lincoln University classes for this semester. We really want to gauge what their current perception is of the venison industry and then leading them with a project on how they think we could better promote our story and values. And we want them to really challenge themselves and think about what they, as young people, value, how they receive this information and what they're influenced by. And then they'll present back to us after the semester, and that will be our next form to plant the next steps of our communication plan.
I'm very happy to hear that you're finally focusing on the future of our consumer and our current consumer, even younger than the millennials at university now. Now, of course, a base of some of the Lincoln University will have had some background knowledge already. Sarah, what kind of ideas do you think they'll come back to you with? Is there any sort of early indication?
Well, we're pretty open to any ideas that they come back to us with. We want to remain really open-minded about it. But we're expecting that we are going to learn something from them about how we could connect the deer industry's strong environmental values and the health benefits of venison products with young people's drive for a healthier and more sustainable lifestyle. We know that successfully communicating our story and values to young people and getting their attention in the first place is going to be the big challenge because there's already so much noise and so much messaging out there that it's pretty hard to get airtime. So this is a challenge that we're particularly interested in hearing feedback from young people about, is how we can really grab their attention and let our messages be heard.
Now, Millie, as a nutrient specialist for Balance Agri Nutrients, in your day-to-day job, what are some of those key messages around what we feed our deer and going into the health of the end product that we can communicate out in the story?
I see day-to-day deer farmers, and they are all so passionate about what they do, and they really believe in their products, and I think that's really awesome. So I think we need to get that messaging out there. It is a sustainable product, and the animal welfare is really second to none with the deer industry. It's their pride and joy.
And Sarah, in your role with Dairy NZ to come to Deer NZ P2P program, what are some of the learnings that you've had in your role that you can bring across in the thinking in this workshop environment?
It's been really neat to be a part of the DINS initiative. I have to say that I'm envious with how small the deer industry is and how agile they can be in bringing together a group of, future leaders in the deer industry. Obviously, with the scale of the dairy industry, it's much harder to do so. And although we have different resourcing, it's been really cool to see, some of the real tangible outcomes that have, come from getting a small group of people together and actually kickstart some initiatives that are going to drive change sooner than later. It's been really refreshing for me to see both sides, and I've learned a lot.
Just got a couple last questions to both of you. Millie, diversity of thinking. Do you think as an industry we're starting to get there and having a wide range of views across pan-sector groups at the table around one key issue?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think with this innovation group that we've got going, we've got people on farm every day, and we've got industry leaders, which has been really cool. You bring so many different perspectives in. And I think that really drives that diversity and hopefully brings some awesome ideas to really promote our industry.
And Sarah, with that diversity of thinking and workshopping, are we bringing enough outside thinking from outside into our industry, do you believe, when it comes to marketing and communications?
I think it's something that we need to challenge ourselves more with. And that was why it was really valuable getting in guest speakers like Kerry Evans to really disrupt our way of thinking, because it is quite easy to find ourselves in an echo chamber in the ag industry with how we're going to pull ourselves out of some of the challenging spots that we find ourselves in. So I think we are getting better, Sarah, but I think there's still much more sharing of ideas and borrowing of ideas that we can do yet.
And lastly, my question is actually aligned to something I got up and spoke about at a deer industry conference in the past, where a gentleman challenged the DINS board to do more around perception. And I said, well, until you invest in PR as an industry, then you won't see a cent go any further than that. It's all well and great having some fantastic ideas. We see that in politics. We see that in a lot of visions for our sector. But was there any discussions in this workshopping of how it would be funded to see it out?
To be honest, the funding, our purpose of this innovation group is to basically map out what might be impactful, and then it would be much further down the road that we look at funding any such strategy. So it hasn't been talked about as yet, but it is something that will be on the table for discussion in the coming months and years.
Fantastic. If there's anyone listening, Millie, who's keen to be part of the innovation group and your projects going forward, what can they do to get in touch?
Yeah, we're definitely very open to anyone coming, any ideas, anything. It's going to be ever going project, I reckon. So any new ideas, definitely jump on board. Main contact would be Rob Aloy. He's awesome. You'll see his contacts come up at some stage during this conference. He'd be your main point of contact.
Thank you so much, ladies, for taking the time to join us. And a notable point, Sarah and Millie are sister-in-laws, if you're wondering, not sisters. Sarah Howe and Millie Howe, they're part of the P2P Innovation Group around story, perception and values. Wonderful work going on there as part of the Passion to Profit.
Rabobank, New Zealand's only specialist food and agri-bank. A bank working together with farmers for farmers. Our commitment to our rural clients and their communities runs deep. More than a century ago, farmers in the Netherlands made sure they were treated fairly when it came to getting the finance they needed to grow food. They knew they were stronger and had more clout if they got together. That idea has endured with Rabobank across the decades and across the world. It's how we get things done. Combining our extensive global knowledge and strong local networks with our highly regarded Rabo research, we're in this for the long haul. Food and agri is in our DNA. Today, New Zealanders save with Rabobank and their savings stay in New Zealand to support Kiwi farmers and food producers. These savings are supporting strong, successful, sustainable rural businesses, and they're helping New Zealand. Savers and borrowers, town and country all coming together. Together is how we can make a difference. We're more productive together. Together we can grow an abundance of healthy food while protecting our world. Together we'll come up with new and better ways to grow food using the latest technology that's environmentally friendly. And together we'll work with our clients to produce great food sustainably and reduce food waste. Together is how we face the future and overcome its challenges.
Hi, I'm Nicola. I'm a consultant based out of Dunedin, working for DINS as their Southern Environmental Project Manager. I met Hugh at a recent Rural Professionals workshop on the environment that we ran online. Hi Hugh, good to see you again. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Hugh Jackson and I'm currently based in Southland and working for Dairy NZ based out of the Invercargill office. I grew up on a sheep and beef farm in a farming village called Te Akau, which is located just north of the Raglan Harbour. I studied a Bachelor of Agri-Commerce at Massey University in Palmerston North for 3 years, and I've since managed to pick up this trainee consulting officer role with Dairy NZ.
Thanks, Hugh. We'd better clear this up because at this point, a whole bunch of deer farmers are at risk of zoning out because you are interested in deer but working at Dairy NZ. What's going on there? Was that a typo or something?
Yeah, good point, Nicola. But yeah, I am working at Dairy NZ. The graduate program for me that Dairy NZ offers so far has allowed me to develop my skill set and grow as an individual in the agricultural sector. While currently I am working in the dairy industry, I have a keen interest for most facets of agriculture, including the dairy industry.
Great, thanks for clearing that up, Hugh. So what was it then that sparked your interest in deer?
What sparked my interest in deer would have definitely been last year in my third year agricultural production systems paper. We had the option of choosing a farm to study throughout the year, and I chose to study a sheep, beef and deer farm in the Pohongona Valley, which is owned by Tony and Linda Gray. Having previously had very little experience with deer, I found learning about them super exciting and really interesting.
Awesome. So last year you attended the Big Deer Tour. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. The Big Deer Tour was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me. I loved every bit of it. It was one action-packed week that opened my eyes to the industry, and it was great to visit so many farms and processes and see the full spectrum, really. It was really cool.
So was there one thing that really stood out for you?
The diversity that exists within the deer industry is probably something that really stood out for me. On one hand, you've got velvet being produced for medicinal purposes, and on the other, you have trophy stags being bred for recreational use. And then finally, you've got premium venison being produced and sold. It was really cool to experience all of that. And there was 8 of us on the trip, 4 from Lincoln and 4 from Massey. So it was good fun to do it with them as well.
That sounds like an amazing and valuable opportunity. So turning now to the Rural Professionals Environmental Workshop, clearly you still have an interest in deer. And so we asked a bunch of you to be guinea pigs for our first online environmental course. Can you tell us a bit about why that course was helpful for you?
Yeah, for sure. I found these workshops really useful in order to get a better understanding of the environmental issues that affect the deer industry and gain valuable insights on why deer act the way they do. It reinforced for me the importance of implementing good management practices to minimise environmental impacts.
What was one thing you really enjoyed about the environmental online course?
One of the standouts was probably being able to meet a whole heap of guest farmers on each call and also look at photo examples. And we did it virtually, but we could still do a bit of on-farm almost investigation through looking at photos and seeing what people are doing right and what people are doing wrong. Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Hugh. We're pleased it was so useful. So what would you say to any students or fellow rural professionals that you came across about opportunities to learn a bit more about the deer industry?
I would seriously advise them to consider it, as I believe it is a fascinating industry to learn about and be a part of. From what I've witnessed so far, it is full of awesome people and that are super supportive and passionate about the industry and truly want to see the sector succeed.
And a final question from me, Hugh. Do you see yourself working with the deer industry even more in the future?
Yeah, for sure. The deer industry is something I want to be a part of in some way, shape or form. And I have really enjoyed my involvement with it so far. And I'd also like to thank Rob Below and Deer Industry New Zealand for organising and running the Big Deer Tour last year. As I said earlier, it was an awesome opportunity and experience and one I will never forget.
Thanks, Hugh. It's been great to chat to you.
Thank you so much for all of you for staying through this second edition of the Deer Industry Conference 2020, where the focus is all about you. Now, to wrap up, we're joined by Phil McKenzie, who presented earlier, to take all your questions live. So, of course, we've got them here in the YouTube chat below, as well as, of course, in the Facebook comments. Great to see some new faces have popped up. Catherine Morrow is in Hamilton, and, of course, Mr. Grant Charteris from Tikakino is watching in the Central Hawke's Bay. So wonderful crowd, wonderful numbers. And of course, we are going to close out, as I said, taking some live questions from Phil McKenzie, who joins us now. Good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon, Sarah.
Thank you so much for your very insightful presentation around the action that's happening with the P2P. Now, you have only been part of the P2P for a short period of time, of its 5 years. What has been some of the standouts for you?
I guess the standout for me, Sarah, has been the way we were able to use the proven engagement techniques that have been developed over the last 5 years with advanced parties, and using the networks and the contacts that the DFA had. We were able to pivot and get 14 deer industry environment groups going over the last 12 months, which was just fantastic to be able to leverage the learnings.
Oh, absolutely. A huge undertaking. You've got a whole range of projects, as you just said, underway. Are you looking to add anything new?
I think it's been something I've noticed as I've come in that it's been an innovative program from the start, and I think that reflects the industry as a whole. And the way it's developed, and we're always open to anything new. It's we'll have a go at anything. It has to broadly fit within the parameters of the P2P program and agreements, but we've been able to stretch that to a wide range of areas, and doing things new, doing things differently is what we're all about.
You mentioned in your presentation about a lot of the partnerships that you've been able to achieve. How important are they, and can you give some examples of their success?
Yeah, look, I think they're critical from the farmers involved, the rural professionals, the project managers looking after all the range of P2P projects, the partnerships we have with DFA and of course the main one we have with MPI. They've all been critical to getting things done, and of course it takes people to make all of those things work. And just the examples have been, I guess, the way we've been able to integrate some of the projects. You know, we set out initially to learn and help as much as we could with feeding, with animal health, with more latterly environment, advanced parties, and now we've been able to integrate some of those projects together. So you can't do that without strong partnerships there to help make that work.
Now, just anyone else that is watching that may have some questions for Phil, feel free to send them through. One last question from me, Phil, is we had there, of course, Sarah Howe and Millie Howe. How important is sort of that extension of the work that you do within P2P beyond the farm gate to our consumer?
Yeah, look, it's critical, and you've heard Reece and Innes talk a little bit about that already, and I'm sure you'll hear some from Nick next week. And it's vital that we connect with our consumers at the end of the day. Someone consumes our wonderful products, so it's critical. And I think it's also great to see that new thinking coming in. You know, no one of us has the mortgage on the best ideas, and to get new thinking, such as from that innovation group and others that we've showcased today, is just fantastic for the whole future of the industry, I think.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. As Phil McKenzie there, a great way to close out the second of a 3-part series in the 2020 Deer Industry Conference, where the focus this year is all about you, and of course bringing it live to you wherever you are in the comfort of your own home, or wherever you are watching this live stream, of course, on demand within a couple of days. And that's, of course, not only on YouTube but also on podcasts, and the individual presentations will be there, so you can skip through and find the ones that you're after. Make sure you also take the time to share those as well, because knowledge is, of course, better when it is shared. And of course, we will be back next Tuesday from 1 o'clock for the last in the 3-part series. We love your feedback, and if you had any issues or you'd like to make any suggestions, please email me directly, sarah@puriummedia.com. If you'd like to see the program for the 3rd edition, and the 2020 Deer Industry Conference, which is online. Go to deernz.org and you'll find that on the front page. I believe it's just off there to the left. I'm Sarah Perry. I've been your MC for today's online conference. It's been an absolute pleasure, and you've been a very engaging audience today, which is really great. So I hope we kick it up another notch again with more questions because again, the focus is all about you. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will be returning for the third instalment next Tuesday from 1 p.m.